I gave everyone a brief introduction of who you guys are, but let's start with just introducing yourselves and a little bit about what you do at your respective companies.
Hi guys, my name is Shekoski. I work at Kelly Scott in Madison. I've been there for about 17 years or so, and I specialize in the video investment side of things, whether it be national, local, digital, CTV, terrestrial, you name it. I kind of focus there primarily.
And I'm James, work at Zillow. Been there about 3 years, a director on our media team. I cover Street Easy, if there's any New Yorkers in the house. There we go. Cover Street Easy and then rentals on the Zillow side, and B2B, all of our agent activity. So managing our agency, we have an in-house team working on search and social, and I'm super excited to be here.
And I'm Thomas Atkins. I lead integrated media planning, online and offline channels for our domestic U.S. properties, so anything brick and mortar in the U.S.
So you'll hear about the theme a lot today, right? This fragmented TV landscape. Like, why has the industry become so fragmented all of a sudden?
All right, I'll take it. I mean, you guys have hit on the head from start to finish from the two presentations you just listened to, is that it has gone from being just a terrestrial television spray and pray, right? Throw money up at the problem and hope it lands somewhere and get a reaction out of it, to now being so focused on whether it be CTV, whether it be a digital stream, whether it be influencer, social, we're gonna talk about a little bit, but that video still holds a lot of power. So it's just gotten so fragmented, in my opinion, because we've had a hard time connecting the dots of when they've been built out, right? So it's been start to finish something that has never been bridged, and now we're at a point in our media where we're starting to bridge the measurement and bridge the currencies, and that's how it's gotten fragmented, and it's hard to kind of find that path to merge the two.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny when you think about the square box that you've watched in your house for the last, 30, 40 years, or however long TVs have been around, hundreds of years, I don't know. Linear TV and the linear TV partners really dominated and monopolized that device, and as technology and the internet came along, it became easier for providers to have an app, and anyone can sort of be a part of the TV space now, anyone with money, with apps. But so we saw the unbundling of all of these services and apps, and I think we're starting to see a rebundling of some of these services, like through Discovery Plus and Disney Plus. So it's been an interesting marketplace, and it's been very fragmented, but I think it's actually starting to come together in a more cohesive way over the last couple of years. So it's been difficult to navigate. I think it's becoming a bit easier to navigate, and I do think the tricky part and the most difficult thing that we're going to keep having to navigate is measurement. Like, how do we measure all of these different media sources in an apples-to-apples way? I think a lot of partners have their own unique capabilities for measurement, which I love, and it's great to see measurement within those different partners, but holistically, measurement continues to be a bit of a challenge, and that fragmentation is a part of it.
I would just add that I think maybe one of the more recent shifts that we're at least watching very closely is the fact that linear TV has really held sway over live sports for a very long time. And so as companies like Amazon start getting the rights to those games, there's going to be increased fragmentation there, just because that is one area where linear has really maintained their control. And as that continues to split off, it's going to be interesting to see how those patterns continue to shift.
So as we're dealing with more screens and more difficult measurement, how has that ultimately impacted your overall media strategy?
It is really important to understand the KPIs of the account and the client and what their needs are. If it is a branding campaign, are we looking to get a click-through? Are you looking to get an activation, someone searching and seeing your spot? Are we looking for a QSR code? I can go on and on, right? But really understanding what the client needs are, and then focusing on partners that can achieve those needs. I mean, we're living in a space now with media, especially in television, where that dollar has to work really hard. It's just how it's the world we live in now. So figuring out what the KPIs of the client are, and then picking the medium that will best suit you. I'm a firm believer that television holds a lot of value and a lot of strengths, and so does CTV. And the two need to work together to have their strengths be lifted to the highest potential. And figuring out that blend. One little stat I like to use right now is that I think Nielsen is saying CTV is 50% of all viewership of video, and television is 50% as well. But if I break that down to what we just learned from this presentation, of what available ad insertable inventory, I think it's still 70% in the linear space. So you can ignore that. So they both have to work together to really come to a full circle. So understanding the KPIs, the needs, brand awareness, click-through, you name it, and working together to find that mix.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think every great and smart media strategy, when you ask how is it changing our media strategy, it always starts with understanding our customer and how do they consume media and where do we reach them, and the screens and the platforms, they change, and I think it's just important every year to continue to stay on top of how those trends are changing, which is the broad story, and having a really solid pulse on your performance, so your measurement, your historical measurement, where are the trends going, and taking those baby steps. It doesn't even have to be annually, it can be every quarter, and making optimizations as you go, and I feel like it's difficult sometimes to like recreate, or I think when you try to start from scratch, that's like, if there's a new brand entering the space, starting from scratch and finding your footing can be very hard in this very fragmented marketplace, and you got to start somewhere, have a really solid measurement roadmap to understand what you're buying and how it's performing, and I feel like at the end of the day, that sort of provides the path. It's provided the path for Zillow of where to go and what's working.
Just adding to that, I would say that, of course, audience first, as always, but just taking a look at your brand framework and the assets that you have, the reality is a lot of that's going to dictate where you live and how you present your brand. And so it's something where I think sometimes we as media planners, at least on my team, will put together a beautiful plan. We're like, this is the best work we've ever done. And then we get the creative and we're like, this might not fit. And so it's a real understanding of saying, hey, I might want to be buying into live sports, but this spot has a lot of talking. You might not be able to hear that in bar. It doesn't contextually align. And so I think being realistic about where you're at with the creative, being pulled earlier into the process in those conversations as a media team so that you can better have the media plan reflect the values of the creative in the company and what the company is trying to promote is going to help you navigate that landscape a little bit faster and more easily.
So there's these conversations that linear and digital have to work better together, right, for a holistic media plan. TV is one of those channels, too, where the agency and the client also have to work hand in hand, right, because so much of the buying is still handled by the agency. Very rare, we have both an agency and clients on a panel. So Thomas, James, like what do you need to better have the relationship with your agencies to work better together?
So we actually do all of our media buying in-house. So I will change my answer slightly because
James, it's all you.
Well, but I will say really quickly, we do work with the creative agency, so that has been the tough part, is just trying to get in those conversations earlier in terms of where do they want to set the brand platform and how do they want to set the creative framework, and then how do we then build a plan around it. So that has been our focus.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both the agency and the client side, and it's interesting coming over to client side and sort of stepping away from seeing the vendors and hearing the vendors, and I'm excited to be here to just get a little bit more up to speed on like what's going on. But I think at the end of the day, it is trust with your agency, and it's a two-way street. I think that a lot of times I've been at agencies where it's a one-way street and you're just getting a bunch of direction from the clients or orders, if you will, and it's not a two-way street. And so I think that's what makes our buys successful. Like when we're all working together and, us as a brand are sharing what's going on at the top and the politics and the insides of the company with our agency so that they can better the buys. And so I think that communication and two-way street relationship is what makes, and us learning, like our agency bringing us, trends and what's going on in the industry, that helps us understand and move together.
It is super important what you just said, is that when agencies and clients come together, it is no longer I work for you, you work for me. I work with you and I am part of your team, and all that information you share is so amazing to build the buys and build the campaigns off of that. So it's no longer, for me, it's really important when it comes to agency and client for it to be a friendly, outgoing friendship. I still have a client I worked with 12 years ago who texts me every Thanksgiving about the Lions because I'm a Lions fan. And
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's actually a good year, the news. That's okay. But also the Packers. So it's somebody I worked with 12 years ago, and we are very different people. However, it's that relationship that's still built, even though we don't work together closely anymore. So it's super important to have that connection.
Cindy, you talk about the flow of information. As the agency representative, do you feel like you get enough information about the business from the client?
Yeah, first-party data is super, super important. So if we're able to get our hands on that, what we can do with that with our dashboarding and with our research is amazing. Do we get all of it? No, we don't always get all of it. Do I want more? Always. I mean, agency, we're data freaks, right? I mean, the most exciting thing with what's happening now for me in our industry is how currency is evolving and how measurement is evolving. So the more I can get, the more I can ingest, and the more I can drill down, the better chance I have of making that dollar work really hard for you guys. So we always want more so I can go to the right places for you, hence that targeting we keep talking about.
Yes, totally, and I would add on to the data and the context. I feel like a lot of times we hand off the data and hand off the numbers, and we lose the context of why do we care about this, and why is it important, why is it moving the needle, and that inevitably, I feel, tells the biggest story, so it's both, I feel, work together.
So there's clearly been a ton of shifts in the industry. How do you prepare clients or leadership who are not well-versed in the media space of like all these shifts that are happening, that people who may still want to spend all their money on print?
For me, don't go all in print. For me, I think that educating the client with what medium's strengths are, and then drilling down from there with targeting. Because now we live in a world where we can target so much that we'll lose ourselves in data. So understanding the mediums you want to go in, having them all work together, understanding the splits when it comes to creative that you mentioned before, and how creative wear out. Understanding, from start to finish, whether print plays well with their creative, whether it doesn't make any sense. So there's just this overall arching, looking at every single medium together to get to where you need to be. We're talking about fragmentation in video, right? So it's super important that video is being seen by the right consumer at the right time. But it's also super important that I'm not just partnering with everybody and going everywhere just to hope something works. It's really drilling down to how those partners work with us as well. So it's not just the agency partnership with the client, it's also the agency partnerships with our vendors. It's a very big important step here too. So.
I would just say that, going back to what you said earlier, grounding it in the objective, right? So you have your overall business goals and objectives, you have your media KPIs that stack into that, and if you can always ground it back in that truth and reality, that is immensely helpful. I call that out because a lot of the questions that we get are less about, oh, I want to be doing this because we have been doing it for 10 years, and more about, well, I saw something on TV that said I should be buying this, so why aren't we buying that? Or my granddaughter really loves TikTok, should we be buying here? And so it's a lot of, this is interesting, here are the trends, these are the people who are engaging, but this is who your target audience is, and this is where it lines, and this is where it doesn't. And so breaking that out has always been really impactful. And then I think test and learn frameworks again, right? If they do really want to do something, test it. It's not a big deal, right? I think sometimes we hold something as sacred when it's really not that big of a deal to say, hey, why don't we try it out? And maybe you learn something really interesting, right? Maybe TikTok, you feel like based on all the research, is not the right fit for this audience, and then you run it and performs fantastically, and that gives you a new angle at which to approach the work that you do.
Now, outside of selling it in and keeping aligned on the strategic values, right, which is like, where's your audience, where do we need to go? James, what's the biggest challenge you have when buying across digital and linear and trying to have a holistic campaign?
I do think measurement continues to be a challenge. So I think, I love what you said about data and testing, and I think that there is, us as media planners, we have so much data that leads us to our recommendations, and we're getting to a point where we have so much data that we inevitably, it's hard to make room for testing or trying things that we don't have proven, and so that is a challenge, opening ourselves up to things that may be unproven or things that we've never done before because we don't have the data to say well, we can give up, this dollar here for something that we don't know is going to work. So, that is a challenge, creating space to test. And I think, so that's one challenge. And then the other challenge is will continue to be holistic measurement. And I think we have, many companies have super solid MMMs that give you maybe a channel level read, but it doesn't get down to the partner level or the content level. And we do have solves there with different, partnerships with our partners and conversion lift tests that sort of triangulate success within there. But every year I feel like we make progress as an industry on measurement, and I'm looking forward to continue more holistic measurement. But I think those are the two biggest challenges that we run into or will run into.
Cindy, what about you? When we talk about testing new things, is that a challenge to kind of get clients to test into new platforms and take a dollar well spent into something unknown? How do you overcome that?
100%. Testing is amazing, and if we have the capability to test, we want to test, right? I mean, you see when you read the articles and you read case studies about people who test and have an amazing outcome from it, a part of you wants to kick yourself because you're like, why didn't we test that? Why didn't we try that out? So, but the dollar it has to work hard, and we're in limited dollar areas, right? So we have to be very smart with our choices and our strategic approach. Sorry, to get it all figured out about how we want to spend that dollar. So with the ability to test and the capability to test, if we can do it in the local space, is always a great place to play around with testing in markets that we know have the audience they're looking for. But something really important that you mentioned that I kind of want to just piggyback on real quick is content. Understanding what content is performing well, live sports content, local news live content. Streaming now, we're watching a lot of the younger generation, like watching older shows. I know my partner and I were just talking about that. Like his daughter's watching like Family Matters and she's 17, but she's streaming Family Matters. So content is really becoming important to be in the right places for this as well when you're making these targeting decisions.
I will say that part of what has enabled us to test a little bit more frequently than we would be doing otherwise is that we have a team dedicated to test and learn. We call them sort of our internal R&D department, so to speak, and they have their own budget. So I lead the enterprise team. Our goal is efficient dollar use, and so I'm not allowed to touch their budget. Otherwise, I would totally steal it if I could. But a lot of it is based on saying, hey, this is an interesting learning. I don't have the funds to spend against this. Can you take that on? And so they build out the geo-left tests, the A/B frameworks, things of that nature for things that we aren't sure will work. And so their goal really is to fail fast and fail forward. And we've gotten some really interesting learnings from that process.
So TV has always been the brand awareness channel, right? But now, CTV. So what do you guys think? Is CTV brand awareness or is it performance?
I guess I'll say that I think all channels honestly can be both. And I would say CTV, like search, for example, I'll just go all the way down to search. Like search can drive awareness if you're bidding on non-branded keywords, capturing people who don't know that you exist. And so, yes, it definitely is more of a performance channel. But I think when we look at, and I don't know the word that Adam used of brand performance or something, brandformance, like that's totally how we look at it at Zillow. Like most of our channels are doing a little bit of everything. Like our CTV is driving performance, and actually sometimes CTV can be more like VRMMM, it shows that it can be more performant than search in sometimes. So, and it's also driving brand awareness along the way, and so is social. Social is doing the same thing. Social can drive awareness and performance. So I think the answer is it's both. And I think that if you're telling a one-sided story of it's only doing one or it's only doing the other, you're definitely missing the full story. And the full story is like the most compelling story for your brand and for leadership. I mean, leadership would love that story, right? So the tricky part is measurement again. But we think of it as both, and most of the people on our media team cover the full funnel. So we think about the whole funnel and every layer. And although TV might have a role of awareness, it still is driving performance, and telling that story holistically is super important.
I would say that television does lean a little bit more to more of the scale of the reach, for sure. So yeah, so if you really do want to get your message out there and that video to be seen on a broader scale, you do have to recognize that television is still going to be the 600-pound gorilla in the room that you can't ignore to get that actual message out. And then with the additional layering of targeting with the CTV and the search, I think that television just should not be ignored, though, still.
I think the earlier call out around tying TV or CTV performance to lifts in search intent, visitation back to your site, et cetera, was great. I think then if you're going to try to tie it back to those performance values, that would make it more performance focused. It'd be a little bit more on saying, okay, for every new qualified visitor to my site, what is the chance that I'm going to get that conversion on the back end? And so especially if you have a product that has a longer conversion cycle, which I think is where this becomes a little bit more difficult, is understanding the different touch points and how they interact with each other. So it's never an easy answer, right? Everything overlaps. You can see a performance ad followed by a brand ad, vice versa. No one's ever going to see that perfect linear funnel approach that we love in media, but just making sure that you're there, you're present, and you have the right targeting in place to say, okay, this is the intent focus space where you're leading with maybe CTV and you're running something that's saying, hey, for us, right, you are a travel audience, but also we want to layer in Las Vegas intent. If I'm layering in Las Vegas intent, that's going to lean performance, right, because that is reaching someone that is much more likely to be in the market for my product right now. And so depending on the intent signals you use, regardless of the medium, you're going to have it carved one way or the other, even though I would tend to say it's more on the brand side.
So as streaming becomes popular, right? The rise of streaming happens. What are some of the biggest changes that you guys have seen in the CTV buying space, and how has that impacted your buys?
CTV used to be something that was just an added value. You guys remember that when it was when you were buying television and they were just throwing CTV at you and you're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Now it has become such a valuable thing, and it is why the dollars have become stretched even further because we realize there's value in that CTV. So yeah, it's just it's.
The biggest changes.
The biggest changes, yes. So it's just the value of the medium itself, and then also the medium itself and how it has become so hyper fragmented, going to Peacock, to Hulu, to Discovery, to all of it. So it's just interesting how it's all played out for sure.
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like everything's changed and nothing's changed at the same time. You know, like we still buy, like, over the last 10 years. I mean, the programmatic capabilities have evolved and data and targeting have evolved, but it's all sort of the same as it's been. And I think we continue to look at CTV and like your living room device as a great leaned in platform, no matter how we buy it.
Yeah, I would, piggybacking off of some of the earlier statements, I would say that the price point has gone up significantly enough that I think it changes how you approach CTV as a medium overall. And so you might say, okay, I will actually grade up my CTV vibe a little bit and go into more premium inventory because the cost to be in that inventory is not significantly different from just run-of-the-mill programmatic. And so that gives you an opportunity to say, hey, maybe I buy more social for that reach and scale piece, and then I lean into more premium inventory spaces for CTV. So if you're trying to balance your dollar effectively, it gives you a different way to play with it just because the price point has shifted so much.
So CTV has become more prevalent, but it's also become more expensive, but it's also the way that you can effectively better personalize and target your audiences, right? So how are you targeting audiences to maintain scale and frequency and reach across these digital channels?
I mean, we continue to. How are we using targeting? I mean, we've tested many partners and tested many different types of targeting, and I think that Zillow's business continues to change, and so our targeting approach has been very nimble with different partners. We do have a DMP that helps, you know, with some of our targeting, and we work with partners who have strengths, I guess, in different sides of the targeting. But I think we still use TV, to your point, and CTV as a broad reach approach, which usually works.
So we have time for one more question before we go to the audience. James, you talked about measurement is one of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure Cindy, Thomas, you can agree. How are you effectively measuring across all these channels that we can play in now when it's never an apples to apples comparison?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this, and I again, this is like also what keeps me up at night is we have just so much data, and so we have really great data in some areas and really bad data in some areas, and so the MMM is a great tool for us to holistically understand how video is working, and then we do rely on partners to help us sort of triangulate success within each of those different areas, which is not apples to apples, and some partners look better than the other, and it's hard to say like, oh, it's actually the media or it's the methodology, and so there's gaps there, and so, you know, I think because of that, we kind of get an analysis paralysis and we can't make decisions and we can't move forward. And I think that's a bit of like what makes me nervous and what keeps me up at night is we lose a bit of the art of what we do. It's all turned into like the science of what we do. And it's had been a very art and science world, and now it's very science forward. And so I think like what the way we do measure media works. And I think the challenge for us is to continue to use the data that we do have, make decisions, and keep testing and learning, and that's inevitably how we see success.
And I think it's then taking that step back with all that measurement and then reminding myself, what was your KPI? Did we see people come into the stores? Did we see conversions on your site? Did you get a brand lift So once you're able to take a step back from all that measurement and make sure you're getting the actual KPI full circle here, then you know something's working, right? Media still has a lot of value, and media does really work, so.
And I'll just add, I think, to James's point, right, MMM's great for overall. I think we still use last touch measurement candidly for conversion-based pieces, and I think a lot of people still do. And so our gap is, and to your point about triangulating, is how do you layer in A/B studies and geolift tests in a meaningful way, right? So for us, right, there are a few partners that are not proven out from a last touch model on driving actual bookings, hotel bookings, but we still work with them because from a geolift standpoint, they've outperformed massively. So it's something where at least we have that argument and we can start stacking different pieces in the middle, right? So we have an overarching story, you have the bottom of the funnel story, so now it's finding the right pieces that your leadership likes and buys into so that you can start marrying them together. Because MMM, you're not gonna get maybe the reads as often as you would like to act on those changes, so you need to find sort of those proxy measurements that are associated with those end results and your business KPIs overall.
Any questions from the audience?
Got one. GSD&M in the house.
Good morning, Vivi with GSD&M. We're local. You know, you're talking a lot about the different channels and how important it is to actually talk to the audience in their environment. Production budgets are not as big as they were before, right? Are you using any technology like dynamic creative to actually test different creative to the different audiences in different channels? For example, TVs at bars, or you know, CTV or online video. How are you navigating through it with budgets becoming smaller and audiences becoming more, channels becoming more fragmented?
I would say that we, at least at MGM, so we do some dynamic creative work, not nearly as much as we would like in the video space. And so I think sometimes we'll play with the overlays and the end cards, things of that nature that are a little bit more easy to control. But I would say it's sort of a more straightforward answer for you would be, the reality is we get the creative that we're going to get from a higher level brand standpoint. And so it's about making sure that the buy is optimized towards the creative and not what we want the creative to be.
Yeah. I think same, really, like at Zillow, we have our overarching creative that is the bigger, more glossy produced assets, and then we do have a more nimble team in-house that's able to cut that up and play with it and make cut downs and tailored you know, right asset for the right channel. And I think that's a key component of it too, is having a team that's able to make creative on the fly that for, you know, more efficient dollars. We have tested into some of, you know, like the TikTok creator space where we have influencers and creators making content for free, and then we're running assets on, or running ads on TikTok. So there are some solves with partners that have help us get nimble there. 'Cause yeah, I mean, production budgets certainly aren't growing.
We got one up here, John.
Okay, and right here.
Oh, okay.
James Giuliani, Keurig Dr. Pepper. We've been talking a lot about CTV a bit today. Have you guys been starting to kind of separate the different streaming partners in CTV when we talk about fast and non-fast? A big thing we've been looking forward to in 2025 is getting more into fast and how much cheaper fast is, and has almost the same quality of inventory as you say a Hulu or Netflix, which is much less cost efficient, and instead of going to a Peacock or Tubi that's much more cost efficient. Have you guys been like separating those out when you're CTV buying, or you kind of see it as one big bucket?
Say more on fast.
Fast, so free ad-supported TV.
Oh,
so yeah.
yes. We do a little bit of everything, and I think that's the tricky part, is that we balance for sure like some of the premium placements on CTV, which have a higher CPM and we know are maybe a little more premium, and then we have ad supported, and I think that's the tricky part, is like the measurement becomes hard to prove, because the ad supported platforms, although they have a different CPM, they might be performing better, and that's something that's somewhat hard to prove. So all that to say, like our approach and the way we think about it is the right mix to drive reach and coverage across our audience, and then triangulating some of the success there. It's a difficult one.
I would just say that because there's so many different ways of buying CTV, and you can go through the TV provider you can go through fast. You can go through the Hulus of the world. I think where we tend to look at it all together is just because we're trying to manage the number of different ways in which we might buy CTV. And so I say that only to call out the fact that if you buy with one partner and they both somehow end up on Hulu, as an example, your frequency can accidentally jump up really high for that same user if you're trying to buy and look at them completely differently. So understanding where that user might end up and then how the different types of buys that you're doing stack is going to really be important. I think we tend to run certain types of buys through our in-house DSP because of that, so that we can manage reach and frequency holistically. And then we'll shift some of those higher touch point buys to direct IO to ensure that we're buying into something a little bit more high profile that we wouldn't be getting as part of a regular programmatic buy.
Thomas, James, Cindy, thank you guys so much.